From Canada, Citizens Forum, where we look at the important issues of the day through a lens of democracy and media and try to figure out, how do we build a better country for ourselves? Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. It is Saturday, March the 1st. My name is Jack Etkin. I'm here with Norm Ryder and Mehdi Najari. The theme of this show, from my perspective, is news and current affairs, but with an underlying theme of the importance of democracy and the importance of having a free press. I was going to talk about the Ontario election, and I will, but I want to start off just saying something about housing. Over the last few months, I've talked to a couple of families who have adult children who can't afford to move out of the house, right? And they can't start their lives. And, to me, what this all is a deliberate transfer of wealth from average Canadians up to the banksters and the speculators and the investors at the top. And the reason I say that's what it is because, in fact, that's what it is. I'm saying it's deliberate. People must think it's by accident or something because there's no organized fight back on this. Why do we, the second biggest nation in the world, with a population of only 40 million people and a lot of wealth and a lot of natural resources, we can't build enough homes for the people who live here? And in my opinion, the government is a big part of this, deliberately. The media are a big part of it because they refuse to tell us the solutions or the truth. And at the top are the corporate sector and the 0.001% who are just making bucket loads of money from everybody else's unfortunate situation. So the thing I wanted to talk about, though, in this first few minutes was the Ontario election that just happened. Just to show how, in my opinion, weak our democratic system is here in Canada. So this is about proportional representation, which is a voting system different than the voting system we use now. And what I would suggest is that the voting system we use now does not give us the governments we actually elect. And that is a big flaw in a voting system. And also, the voting system we have now is easier for the corporate sector to control. It's easier for them to control the outcomes. In Europe, where they use proportional representation instead of the system we use here, I think we've noticed over the past number of years, at least I've noticed, that Europe seems to have better environmental policy. Europe seems to have better health care than we do. Europe seems to have, they don't have the housing disaster that we have here, and better social policies overall. Definitely higher protection for the population in their food, right? Here, anything goes. The corporations can do whatever they want. In Europe, they're better protected. And I think a lot of that came from the fact that they have proportional voting systems, which do give people a little more control over the governments they elect. Now, Europe is being just under tremendous trouble. But that's again, why is that happening to what was a fairly democratic situation? So in the Ontario election, the Doug Ford government just won. Out of 124 seats, they won 80 with a vote of 43%. So they got a large majority in the government. They are the government, a very strong government, with 43% of the votes. The NDP got 20% of the votes and elected 27 seats. Okay, So the NDP got 20% of the vote, elected 27 seats. The Liberals got 30% of the vote and elected 14 seats. So they got 50% more votes, but they elected only half the people into the government because of the failings of this first past the post system that we have now. The Greens got 5% of the vote and they got 2 seats. So somewhere I worked out the numbers and I hope I can find that, which I can't. But let's just say that, oh, here it is. Yeah. So for the Conservatives, it took 27,000 voters to elect one Conservative into the government. With the NDP, it took 35,000 voters. They had to get 35,000 votes to elect one person. The Liberals needed over 100,000 votes to elect one person. They needed 103,000 votes to elect one person. And the Greens needed 120,000 votes to elect one person. So you can see if you're a Liberal voter in that particular election, you're worth nothing. It takes 103,000 of you to elect one person, whereas the Conservatives only needed 27,000 to elect one person. And we almost always find that the top parties get a real bonus from the voting system. I mean, if you would have told me 20 years ago that a voting system is in any way important to democracy, I wouldn't have understood what you were talking about. But now, I do think that a voting system is very important for democracy. And that's why proportional voting is never talked about. I mean, the media are not going to say in this Ontario election, oh my goodness, why do the Conservatives have a majority with only 43% of the votes? Because the media fully support this voting system because it's easier for the corporations that control the media to also control our elections, because this voting system that we have is fairly easy to control compared to proportional representation or a proportional voting system, which is just more difficult for the powerful to control, which is why in Europe, Northern Europe, where they use it a lot, things had been pretty good. So I think that issue of proportional voting is something that people should keep in mind, and we should be asking, why isn't it an issue? It's never an issue, almost never an issue, and it comes up once in a while. But it is of fundamental importance. I think our healthcare system would be a lot better. Our housing disaster would be a lot better. Our health would be a lot better if we had a proportional voting system. And we should keep in mind that we don't have it because the power structure doesn't want it. And people should be furious about that. So that's my comment. Norm, maybe we can go on to the issue that you wanted to bring up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, as you know, that I'm quite concerned about electromagnetic radiation. And one of the, I guess you could say, leading authors on the subject, he was in his 75th year, I guess you could say, that he died on Tuesday. Now, he wrote 2 very important books. The first was on electromagnetic radiation, or electricity, I guess is a better way to put it, called The Invisible Rainbow, A History of Electricity and Light, where he went back into history and started looking at the first use of electricity, at least in the modern sense, and that was static electricity. Believe it or not, there were some very interesting studies back in the I think it was 1700s. Now, that particular book, I'm pretty cheap. I don't buy books very often if I can find them online. Well, I found this one online, but it was so good I actually went out and bought a hard copy of it as well. So that impressed me. His second book, The Earth and I, was a book that the publishing or release of it was delayed in October because of his illness. I don't know for sure what his illness was. I suspect it had something to do with getting a lot of or X-ray radiation when he was in medical school. He never quite finished medical school because of the effects of the radiation, and went in as a journalist, a researcher, and did a number of things. Now, one woman that knew him, I wish I had known him. He sounds like a very interesting person. That got the obituary that will be up on the screen for you to take a look at and scroll through, as well as the link. This woman said that Arthur Furstenberg was a gift to this earth largely because of his entire life attempting to protect and improve the earth and all its inhabitants. Cantankerous and obstinate would be two appropriate adjectives to describe this unique man. Now, I think that, well, those two issues, you know yourself, you got to fight very hard to get any proper attention, proper anything being done about them. And yeah,
I think the underlying theme here is that this is a health issue and a public health issue, because electromagnetic radiation, maybe you can explain a little bit where we're exposed to it from, is, a lot of science says it's dangerous, it's not good for our health, it's unsafe. But because it's big business, that's all ignored, and the corporations just do what they want. But Arthur Furstenberg was writing about that.
that's correct. There is natural radiation from the sun at 100,000 times less than what we receive from things like our cell phone or Wi-Fi. A lot of people think you need Wi-Fi to go on the computer, and you don't. The better way to connect it actually is with a wired connection and not use the Wi-Fi. Cell towers, and this includes more than just 5G. It's been going on from the cell towers since long before, in I guess the 1980s, we started getting cell phones and some cell towers radiating people. Baby monitors are another thing that a lot of people, I mean, just the idea of putting a baby monitor next to a child.
So are you saying there's a health problem there?
Very serious one, especially at a young age. People are more sensitive to it. I've measured the radiation from microwave ovens, and there's a real temptation to stand in front of a microwave oven and watch your food cooking. Now, stupid, but you're receiving radiation at over the amount that Safety Code 6 says, and we all know that Safety Code 6 is very poor, but you're receiving radiation exceeding that limit. Another thing to watch is
Actually, people don't know how, I mean, the safety levels in Canada are disgracefully high, and yet this even exceeds that.
Yeah. Oh, this is it. I was going to say the other thing people should be aware of causing a lot of problems is cordless phones, especially the base station, which radiate at a very high level. I mean, all these things are convenient to use, I understand, but when you realize, and Arthur certainly realized the harm that it was doing to people. Now, this is different than atomic radiation and nuclear radiation. You still talk about it in general terms, but it's a different subcategory. The radiation I received that gave me my brain tumor and the problem with the left side of my face was a little higher frequency than we get from most cell phones now, but still below the millimeter, or what people refer to as 5G. That's a whole complex. We should do a discussion on the 5G shows sometime.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, what I'd like to see is just an honest discussion in Canada of what the benefits of wireless radiation are and what the health risks are. And then Canadians can decide. I think if people knew the truth, we'd all be a little bit shocked, or maybe not. Maybe the truth is that it's all perfectly safe. And yeah, Mehdi, any comment?
Oh, the facts should be put out there for people to know what it is about. And well, just a very simple thing: how many people have read their safety warning in their cell phone manual. And if the manufacturers are telling you to hold the phone away from your head and body for safety reasons, maybe you should listen to what they're saying there.
So are you saying, is that in the instructions in a cell phone?
You have to dig for it, but you find it in usually in the very back. By the time you're so bored you're not reading the manual anymore,
Right.
there are warnings about holding it away from your head and body.
Okay.
And that applies really to your laptop. The laptop's the worst word to use for a laptop. It shouldn't be on your lap if you're using Wi-Fi in particular. Right. Actually, any of the radiation from it is bad.
Mehdi, any comment?
The only thing is that there is a lots of propaganda against regulations. The big corporate interests want not much regulation, either in health or environment or any other aspect of our life, because they want to maximize the profit-making machine. They don't want any barriers. So we see that is the policy, and that is the issue they push. Another issue is that maybe 30 years ago, if there was a controversy on a subject, we would hear in the media both sides of the issue, and there was free discussion of it. Now, the establishment media is telling us what is right for us to know and what we should not pay attention to. So they don't allow free discussion. And we don't see scientists from both sides come and talk freely about their views. Only one view is being projected to people, and that is the view that interests the big business interests. We saw during the COVID the same thing, during the vaccination issue the same thing. They don't allow other point of view, and they even ridicule anybody that say anything else, and that is dangerous.
And Mehdi, the thing you and I were going to talk about completely falls into that box, which is to start with the Russia-Ukraine war, in which only one side of the story is told. And if you dare to have another point of view, the media will just say the most horrible things about you, right? You're whatever.
It is unbelievable that people don't understand why things is happening the way it's happening. They told us during 2010 and onward about Russian aggression. Every news item about that area was about Russian aggression. And really, this is unbelievable, because let me explain a little bit background. In 2012, Mr. Yanukovych, which was a Russian-speaking Ukrainian, got elected as president. Right away, CIA and its group, the non-profit, so-called non-profit groups, went in and start creating tension in the society. And they were pushing Ukraine to become the member of the European Union, so-called European Union, and also NATO. So by 2014, they created a coup. In Maidan, we saw that people are being shot. And the Western media portray that as a government soldiers are shooting people. The fact was, it was a group of snipers hired by somebody to shoot both the demonstrators and also the police. They kill a lot of police, so they created a situation for so-called revolution. And they got rid of Mr. Democratically elected Yanukovych. And why I say democratically elected? Because in that election, when Yanukovych got elected, there were observers from all the Western countries, and all of them signed that the election was fair. So they got rid of that, and they created a situation to put oligarch like Poroshenko into power. And right from the start, they start attacking the Western Ukrainian with the Nazi past they start attacking the Russian-speaking Ukrainian. There is about 40% of the Ukrainian are Russian-speaking. And they start killing Russian-speaking Ukrainian. In May of 2014, they pushed the Russians into this union building and set it in fire. Dozens and dozens of people were killed, burned to death. Here, these are Ukrainian, Russian-speaking Ukrainian, that the Nazis, neo-Nazis, that brought to power by CIA coup in 2014, start killing Russian-speaking people, mostly in Luhansk and Donetsk. And nobody talk about that. There was the Russian push for a peace agreement. We had Minsk I and Minsk II. They supposed to sit and talk. Meanwhile, the Germany and signing to that, getting that. But later, in 2022, the president, the premier of Germany, Angela Merkel, said that that was all a show in order to arm Ukrainian to fight Russia. So they really didn't wanted the peace. In 2019, after Poroshenko people didn't want war, they didn't want Poroshenko that was pushing for war. They elected in the election a guy by the name of Vladimir Zelensky. Zelensky was an actor, you know. One of his accomplishments was standing in a theater in front of audience, supposedly nude, playing piano with his private part. This is the guy that became the president of Ukraine, because at that time he said he's going to bring peace and harmony between people and no division between Russian-speaking and Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainian. So people voted for him. But what does he do? After he got elected, he totally betrayed his promises. He was working, before he got elected, he was working for this tycoon in a TV station. The tycoon name is Igor Kolomansky. These are the few tycoons that were amassed lots of wealth after Ukraine separated from Russia. And Mr. Kolomansky, at the same time, was very close to Israel. He's a Jewish Ukrainian, an oligarch that doesn't really care about Ukraine. And at the same time that he was employing Mr. Zelensky before he became president, he was giving huge amount of money to funding the neo-Nazis, the neo-Nazi Azov battalion. These are the facts. Nobody can deny it, because everybody can go and check, do some search with your computer, and you will see them all there. There is no denial. So why is it a Jewish oligarch funding neo-Nazis to go attack Russian-speaking Ukrainian and burn them to death? And when Zelensky came to power, what he does, instead of, he was saying that he's going to bring peace, but what he did, he banned speaking Russian. Russian language was the official language in Ukraine. He banned it. And he also banned the Russian Orthodox Church. These are the same thing that the Nazis did in Ukraine, and kill lots of Ukrainian, Russian-speaking Ukrainian at that time during World War II, and many massacre of Jewish Ukrainian. You know, so Mr. Zelensky came and do exactly the same thing and empower group, neo-Nazi group like Azov Battalion. What did Canada do? What's the Canada role in all this? In 2015, the U.S. Congress passed a motion that banned their government and Pentagon to train or have any relationship with the neo-Nazis. So here come Canada. Okay, if United States ban, we do it. And Canada was training Azov battalion, the Canadian army, sent people there to train these neo-Nazis to do what? To kill people? And that's what they did. And meanwhile, now the war started in 2022, February 22. Between 2014 to 2022, more than 14,000 Russian-speaking Ukrainians were massacred and killed by the Ukrainian army and these neo-Nazis that later joined Ukrainian army, become part of Ukrainian army. We spent it since 2022, $19.5 billion of Canadian money went to Ukraine to continue the war, to make sure that the war will continue and the Russian and Ukrainian being killed. Why? Is Russia, they call about Russian aggression, is Russia on the border of Canada have troops? Why Canada sent 1,700 soldiers to Latvia? Why? To create tension? And none of these, if you go ask Canadian, do you know these things? They don't. Because the media, especially this ridiculous CBC, is lying to us all the time. And this is what's happened. So now Mr. Trudeau, just a few days ago, promised another $5 billion. So let's see what we could have done with $24 billion instead of encouraging the war and destruction of Ukraine and killing of people. We could have get rid of a lot of our homeless problem. No. The money that we pay as a taxes has to go make war so the American arms manufacturer enjoy huge profit. That's what the whole thing is. And if you think if Mr. Poilievre come to power, he will be even worse. So where is the choice? Where is in this democracy you have? You think if Mr. Singh come to power, he's going to be any different? Of course not. A little bit different, but not much. Because the people that rule over us, they want their share of the wealth. We are only slaves to go to work and pay our taxes, so all of it becomes subsidy to these multinational corporations. And as long as we like it, we go get along, it's going to happen. So,
Mehdi, I would have to say that I agree almost totally with what you've just said, which doesn't mean that you and I are right, but to me, it means that Canadians have just been told a pack of misinformation. They've only been told one side of the story. That's what the media does. Believe me, everything Mehdi said, I've heard from others as well. I mean, there are experts in the field who would agree with what Mehdi had said. As Mehdi said, these are the facts, right? But our media and politicians don't tell us the facts. They tell us the official story. And unfortunately, a lot of people believe them, which I also believed it for most of my life.
Well, I was going to say that I see most of it now as almost scripted. Everything that you said is correct, except it's all been scripted. For what purpose? It's more than just profits for the arms manufacturers in the States. There's something going on. But just thinking about it right now, that it seems to me that the people want to, if they have a chance, will elect an actor. We have right now going out, mind you, but Trudeau, who was trained in drama. We have Zelensky, who was an actor. We have Trump, who his biggest recent thing was on TV with his TV show. Don't forget Ronald Reagan, going back that far, he was basically an actor. but it does bring up that I really think the best president in the U.S. that they ever had was Martin Sheen when he was on West Wing. I mean, it just the whole show what they're diverting us with these things. They're scripting things. Half the stuff that I see on the news, I wonder, was that filmed in a movie studio?
Yeah.
Because I mean, you've been to good movies where it looks very real, the war or whatever they're doing. So I can't trust any of it.
Yeah. Mehdi, any last comment on that?
Just last comment is that I'm not saying believe what I said. I'm saying we should have discussion. We should see both sides of the issue will be presented to people, and people should be the arbitrator of what they want to believe, not just one-sided propaganda machine that we hear even today. With Zelensky and Trump meeting the other day. It's just all show and propaganda. We are not hearing the truth. Let's have both sides or all sides of the issue discussed freely in front of the public and let them choose who they want to believe.
And that goes from issues from A to Z. Every issue is, I mean, the media tell us the official story on housing, on homelessness, on healthcare, on food safety, on crime. They tell us the official story, and we've got to, we need the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Norm, your second topic was going to be?
Well, I think most of us have seen that clown show that went on in the White House yesterday that I keep thinking about every time I see a clip on it. Was that all scripted? Was that planned in advance that you don't call or have a visiting prime minister of a country come in and go on international TV, I guess you could say, with them chastising him and lecturing him? And I mean,
yeah, just to clarify, this is being filmed on the day after the meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky. So that's what Norm is referring to.
I'd say that they must have scripted that to bring him in and do that, knowing that he was going to react angrily, which I frankly don't blame him. But no matter what side of that whole discussion you want to come in, as a person, you almost have to feel sorry for Zelensky for being chastised that way by primarily the vice president, with Trump throwing his few words in to confuse the issue even more. But what I realized what happened after that was interesting. The US government has extended its sanctions, apparently, against Russia. So what game is being played there? I don't know what side Trump thinks he's on now, rather than his own side, which was often some weird world. Mind you, with all this acting, I've come down to the point that I think the best thing to do is get a big bowl of popcorn and sit back and relax and enjoy the show, because I no longer can take the antics of the politicians seriously. Unfortunately, their effects on me are serious, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah, it was kind of, I mean, it was certainly different than what usually happens when the president of one country, Zelensky, visits the White House. It was shocking. It was very Trump-like. I have no idea what the reality. Mehdi, any?
I saw it a little bit maybe differently than you, and the fact is, I saw that Mr. Zelensky was there to provoke. And when you are guest, you don't talk the way he was talking. He was pushing Trump, and then we saw that situation. But one thing people should remember: Mr. Zelensky term finished in May of last year. Calling him president and trying to make a make a deal with him is just nonsense. He has no mandate to make any deal. And the European and Canadian government, European government, they are all pushing for more tension, more war. And I am not sure if Mr. Trump is, as others said, that he's playing a game too, because as Norm said, that he put more sanction on Russia. So they are all playing a game here. They probably because this is the best way to degrade Russia, the cheapest way. The American senator 2 years ago said, this is the most economic way for us to fight Russia, because the fight is between Russia and Ukraine. They are killing each other, and we are enjoying the fruit of it.
Yeah. In my opinion, there was never any need for that war to start. You can make a very good case that, as Mehdi said earlier, the U.S. provoked that war. They were behind that war. But that's not the official story. The official story is what we see in the media every day of the evil Russia. But if you just look at the facts, and lots of experts, maybe the facts I think are correct or wrong. I mean, that's certainly possible. But you can make a very good case in a court of law that the U.S. was behind this war more than Russia was. They provoked and provoked and provoked until Russia. Now, maybe that's wrong, but the case can be made. And yet we don't even hear anything like that. What is wrong? Well, I mean, our media is totally corrupt. We just have to face that fact. And so are our top politicians, in my opinion. They don't work for us. They are here to manage and control us. And what they seem to want to control us into is war with Russia and maybe with China. I mean, that seems to be what they're always pushing. And I don't believe them.
Well, Jack, I was going to say that I'm not so sure we can blame the U.S. for starting it. They were reading their script that they got from the World Economic Forum, which who knows where they get their script from. And I think Putin was every bit as much of a player in that whole script process, that it's more we'll say the World Economic Forum in this case. I think they want to keep division and dissension throughout the world because that's an easier way to control. That when you look back at other things that have happened in the last couple of years, that there's been a great effort to keep everyone divided from each other and fighting with each other. And most people, given a choice, want to get along, but we're being pressured to not get along with everyone else.
Yeah. Mehdi, any last comment?
I just say that the World Economic Forum is the tool of United States mostly. It's the biggest country backer of World Economic Forum. And the oligarch in United States and Western country are the ones that are really ruling the world and creating war, not only in Ukraine, in every other places. They are. United States is the only country in the world that have more than 800 military bases all around the world. Why? Because that is the way to ensure the interest of the oligarch in United States and in Western countries.
I've looked up the membership list of the World Economic Forum. Everybody should. And basically, it's all the biggest corporations in the world, which are controlled by, the people at the top. So I would say that the United States is just a tool used by the corporate sector. And it looks like they're it looks like the United States has played its role for the last 100 years. It's played its role and it's been kind of wrecked. And I'd say the people at the top are moving the power base elsewhere. And so the United States is slowly being isolated. It's doing it, and it'll be down. The next place they'll take over is elsewhere. I want to move on to the subject of tariffs. I saw something in an online magazine called The Tyee. It's by Jeff Rubin, who's an economist and author and former chief economist at CIBC World Markets. CIBC World Markets is the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. So, I mean, that's not where I'm coming from, but the guy's not a schlub like the rest of us. He knows he has training, and he's been up at the top of the ladder. So this is what he says about just about sort of tariffs and tariff policy. If you were to watch the CBC or read the Globe and Mail or whatever, you'd hear these tariffs are a shock. This is an aberration. This is a radical departure from the norm, what Trump is doing now with tariffs. Whereas I think, Jeff Rubin says, that this is a continuum of policies that the White House has had for over a decade, not only dating back to the first Trump administration, but during the entire Biden administration as well, and, and now into Trump's second administration. And the key to this new American policy is to turn the economy into a weapon to wage economic warfare to further America's interests. And whereas Trump has relied on tariffs, Biden has relied on sanctions and tariffs. So, and despite the fact that President Biden and the Democrats were hugely critical of the tariffs that Trump imposed on China in his first administration, not one tariff that Trump had imposed was rescinded by Biden. They were all left in place. Biden kept all of those Trump tariffs intact, and they were the largest tariff hike since the early 1930s in the United States. And in addition to the tariffs, Biden loaded on sanctions as well, which are even more powerful than tariffs. So, Mr. Rubin says, I think this is the new norm. I think that weaponizing the economy and waging economic warfare is the norm that is accepted by both Democratic and Republican White Houses. What's changed is the target. The target initially was America's adversaries, principally Russia and China. And now the target has been refocused to America's neighbors and allies, Mexico and Canada and the EU. And that's what Mr. Rubin said, which I found interesting. And my questions are, what is the impact of this? Because to me, the impact, if Mr. Trump continues, is going to be Canada will move more towards China and Asia. And that's where we will begin to send our exports. And that means a weakening of the United States, right? As they become more isolated because of what President Trump is doing right now. And I think that's the plan. But that's all. That's just what I think.
I'll agree with you. I think that's the plan, that they've been working on this for a long time. And don't forget, fundamentally, the U.S. throughout its history has been isolationist. They stayed out of the First World War until close to the end, and finally came in. The Second World War, they tried to stay out of as well. That they are fundamentally isolationist. But there's one more that, well, first of all, we should mention that around 1900, they were starting to push tariffs quite a bit. And that created quite a economic situation. Part of that came out of that was income tax, and well, I think probably the First World War may have been part of it, as well as the Federal Reserve in the States. But the big push was in 1930, when they put, I think it was 20% tariff on basically everything coming into the country, which the other countries then put on their tariffs, which started the whole issue. And I think really was why the World Trade Organization was made after the Second World War. The other parallel to the 1930s, and a lot of people keep missing this, is that I very much see similarities in technocracy, or marked correctly, Technocracy Inc., and fascism. It's very much similar, and I sure hope to get rid of technocracy, we don't have to have another war like they did to slow fascism down. But the interesting thing with technocracy is that the Canadian leader of it in the 1930s was a Josiah Heldman. Now, Josiah Heldman's, I guess you could say, claim to fame is Elon Musk is his grandson. And Elon Musk is very much pushing the technocracy. It all comes back into this loop. I almost feel like we're repeating the 1930s again right now.
Mehdi, any comment?
I again see it a little bit differently. I don't know about Mr. Musk and his technocracy issues, but what I see is who benefit. If they put this tariff on Canada, what's going to happen? The American corporate interest is going to be the hurt, because most of the stuff we send to America is raw material, either oil or minerals or mining stuffs. So these material go to United States and create a lots of wealth there, not in Canada. You know, that's why, for example, we don't have refinery in Canada for the tar sand, because first of all, for the oil industry here is more beneficial because they don't have to pay taxes, carbon tax and other taxes. They send it raw material to United States and create a lots of job and economic activity there. And the refineries in United States are waiting for this material. So they are not going to hurt their own. So if there will be a tariff for Canada, it will be very limited and limited time, maybe for a few months, to see how much they are going to squeeze us. But the problem is that I encourage people that are listening to us now to go and put a search and put the timeline on your North American Union. And you will see that this is a long-term project, and both liberals and conservative in Canada helped this project. We saw, for example, in 1988, the liberals opposed free trade and the conservative push it through. By 1993, when the liberals came to power, they push it further on. So they are all playing a role here, playing with us, trying to make us believe that we have choices. We don't have that much choices.
Well, Mehdi, I was just going to say you should go back to, the building of the CPR, when the liberals and the conservatives were switching back and forth, and the whole idea of free trade is burned into the Canadian ethos, I guess, to play this silly game.
We're moving on to the last part of the show. The last part of the show is, I called it hot items, but things that are things that are in the news right now. So the first one is the Liberal leadership race. Norm?
Very entertaining show. I presumably it's going to be either Carney or Freeland, and I guess we have our choice. Do we want a retired Goldman Sachs banker, or do we want somebody with very strong Nazi ties to the Ukraine in the top spot? My feeling is, does one of them have to win?
Mehdi?
It's going to be Mr. Carney, and then their choice is between Poilievre, a ruthless cutter of the social expending, and giving a huge tax cut to the rich. That's what he's going to do. That's what Mr. Trump is doing right now, cutting Medicare to give over $4 trillion tax cut to the rich. So this is, it doesn't matter. Mr. Carney will do the same. We don't have choices. It's time to wake up.
Okay, moving on to the state of the environment, which I think is a disaster these days. Just the fact that about 50% of us will get cancer in our lifetime. When I was a kid, I mean, very, very, very few people in Canada had cancer. So now we're up to 50%. Plus, we've all got plastic in our brains, which also never gets talked about. So the state of the environment and solutions. My solution is more democracy and a free press. Norm.
Well, I'm not sure more democracy and a free press will go a long ways towards the solution. We need more of an internal process within ourselves to recognize the harm each of us, and we have to admit it, each of us is doing to the environment one way or another. We have to work together and each of us do our little part. I mean, when you drop that piece of plastic on the road and it gets ground into the pavement and washed down into the sea, you don't think much about your contribution to damaging the environment, but that's exactly where a lot of it is coming from. That, and a lot of us, just by being more aware of the environment, could make a big difference. And of course, so we won't talk about the corporate profits. That's obviously a big part in the whole discussion as well.
Yeah. Mehdi?
I again see it a little bit differently. I blame ourselves too. For example, all these talk about the recycling, the blue boxes. Nobody asks, where are they recycle these material? They don't have any place to recycle them. They either dump it, most of this plastic go to the ocean, or send it to the third world country like India or Africa and poison those people. And we are happy, oh, we are recycling. No, we are not. We are not doing none of that things. What we are doing, we are downloading our pollution to some other people and polluting the planet. Another issue is that the environmentalists went to sleep, went to bed with the corporations. They got a lots of foundation money. And what did they do? Instead of talking about all issues, they put all their eggs in one basket of climatic change and forgot about the pesticide, herbicide, all the mining pollutions, all the other pollutions that generated by these corporations, and allow us to now have a 50% cancer rate. That's what we are doing to ourselves. Time to wake up.
Well, Mehdi, if I could just add one little thing in there. I talked to one of the truck drivers driving the CRD trucks about recycling and where it goes. And he told me that it all goes up to the garbage dump and just gets dumped in with everything else. So
That too.
You feel good when you're doing that, making that effort to separate it out. But then they dump it all back together anyway, so who cares?
Yeah. And what I don't like is that they told us for 20 years that they had a recycling thing going. It was all a lie. They knew it was a lie. Everybody knew it was a lie except the public, right? The last one, the housing disaster, which has so many different parts to it. I mean, it's just out of control. But solutions, Norm?
Well, I think the housing, we are building enough housing. Unfortunately, we're not building it for the ones that need it. And that's creating quite a problem. We talk about housing, we drive down the, shall we say, homeless street here in Victoria. We see all the tents out there. These people need housing. But then you go out into the outlying areas where they're building the housing. There's no way these people can afford the housing that is being built there. So
but somebody's going to be in there. So
I'm not convinced, because I know of housing projects in my area that it took a long time for them to fill them. Now, whether it's the rents, they could lower the rent, whether they just don't have the people who want to move in, I don't know. But I think with this big housing boom that they're pushing hard across the country, or especially across BC, I think you're going to see in about 2 or 3 years' time a lot of empty buildings.
Mehdi?
Yes, but also they can rent it with high prices and force people to pay 50, 60, up to 70% of their income for rent because people need a roof over their head. But the solution is publicly built housing. That right now the government of Canada, government of British Columbia, and all provincial government refuse to do it because they are under the control of development industry. I give you one example. The country of Venezuela, in last 10 to 12 years, by being under severe sanction and economic sanction, you know how many publicly housing units they built? More than 4.5 million units for people that were living in shanty towns, now living in a decent housing. And if a government like Venezuela that under such a severe sanction could do it, government of Canada cannot do it? Of course they can. They don't want to. They are puppets of big corporate interests, and the development industry is the biggest industry in Canada, far bigger than oil industry. That's why we have this crisis. And we have this crisis not only in Canada, in US, in UK, in Australia, and in New Zealand, because they are all working together to screw the people of all these countries.
Norm Ryder and Mehdi Najari, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for watching Citizens Forum this day.
March 1st.
Yeah, thank you.